MMC-TV, can you hear us in the room okay?
Well, we heard Nancy.
Yeah.
Or Nancy heard
It
us.
must be the light, though. They're not.
Okay.
Here's Derek. Oh, Heidi's online too.
Okay.
It's gonna be
a light meeting in person.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good.
We were just saying Heidi and Eric are online.
Yes.
And SJ won't be here at all.
Oh. that what that means?
Sabina, you're muted.
I know.
Okay.
Recording in progress.
I'm gonna turn on. Okay, now the audio's on. Okay, so we are good to go.
Oh, so we were muted. I said thanks to Sabina for. Are we still muted?
No,
What's that?
that's that's the TV.
Oh, okay.
You
Yeah,
can hear us, right?
we can hear you.
We can
Okay.
hear.
Okay,
Yeah,
good.
we're good. We're good.
Many thanks to Sabina for being willing to manage all the technology while Chris is on vacation. Okay.
Take me at the end when it all.
Okay. Well, so far it looks pretty good. So, thank you everybody for coming. I'll call the meeting of the Jericho Planning Commission of August 18th, 2026 to order. Our agenda tonight will mostly consist of, we'll have time for public comment, review, and approve our minutes of July 7th. And then most of our time will be spent looking at our current project, which we have coined as Enable Housing, looking at zoning updates for areas outside of the village centers. And Chris has provided us with an updated project schedule and a summary of feedback that he collected from the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission, as well as public comments that we all heard in person at the open house that we held on August 6th, as well as online respondents to the online survey, which asked some specific questions. We'll debrief about the open house and consider what went well and what we might want to do going forward. We'll share reports from one another, talk about any other business, and then wrap up and plan for our next meeting, which is on September 15th, not on September 1st. Chris and I decided to cancel the planning commission meeting on September 1st so that he has more time to incorporate the feedback into the his red line, his working version of the red line. Does anybody need to make any changes to the agenda? Okay. I'll make one change to the agenda myself, which is that if we have somebody online and in the room, if there are comments that are very specific to the zoning amendments, that package that we're working on, that I'd rather hear those comments during our discussion on topic number 5, Enable Housing, and use the time at the beginning for more open-ended comments for things that are not on the agenda. Is that good with everybody to do that? Okay. Okay, so then the next item on the agenda is to hear a public comment. And again, we encourage you to use the time for items not on the agenda. Does anybody have anything to share with the Planning Commission at this time? Okay. Then I will hear a motion to approve the minutes of July 7th.
Motion to approve.
I will second.
And, okay, so Wendy made the motion and Chris seconded. Does anyone have any corrections or edits for the minutes? Hearing none. All those in favor of approving the minutes as submitted, please say yes.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All righty.
Would you let me in?
Oh, yeah.
So to just set the context of our discussion, the Planning Commission is in the midst of a basically about a year-long project looking at zoning to make it easier to build housing by encouraging clustered development and balancing growth with natural resource stewardship. That was basically the mission that we set ourselves, or we charted that course for ourselves about a year ago. And we are closing in on a draft of recommended zoning amendment.
You might have to say like next slide or something like that.
Okay. You can't just wink. Sure. Next slide. Thank you, Sabina. So Chris and I reviewed the timeline and we looked at the extent of drafting that he has yet to do. And we heard a lot of really good feedback at the open house. We've had great public participation throughout the whole project. We would like to take the last couple of weeks, the last week of August, to really encourage people through the Front Porch Forum to submit comments online. And based on the quantity of feedback he got a lot of technical feedback from CCRPC, and he also got feedback from the town attorney. So he will need that amount of time in order to have a red line prepared that also gives us enough time to have the red line posted for the Planning Commission to review and then thinking through the notice requirements. So here we are today on August 18th. We're going to focus on the feedback that we've heard so far. We will not have a Planning Commission meeting on September 1st, give everybody a chance to enjoy the last of the summer. And then on September 15th, the Planning Commission will review a red line from the town planner that incorporates the recommendations and the consensus and the feedback synthesized together into a red line.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Yes.
So we're going to be discussing the updated red line on the 15th,
Yes.
not receiving it on the 15th.
Correct.
Okay.
So we'll receive it a couple of days ahead of that meeting.
Are we still planning to have an open house in there somewhere?
So,
I know our original date was kind of.
right. So we had originally talked about having a second open house around or on September 12th. We were questioning that, and maybe can we hold that question until we go through the discussion of the first open house to see if we want to do the same thing, do a different format, if we don't feel like it's necessary, whatever. So there might be another event in there. And then based on notice requirements, he's targeting now October 6th for the public hearing, which is 3 weeks later. Okay, so
So wait,
Yeah.
one clarifying question. So we have a public hearing and then after that, we then decide what happens after that.
So if we decide after that public hearing that the draft is basically ready to be forwarded to the select board without significant changes, then we could decide it's good to go and we could forward it. We could also, it might be that we decide that there are significant changes that still need to be made, in which case we would have another round of the red line and then we would have a second public hearing. I think Chris was enthusiastically welcoming a lot of the feedback. I think everyone was pleasantly surprised by the turnout that we had at the open house and by the amount of online responses that are coming in on the survey. So he was kind of optimistic that maybe the red line would be really in great shape and that we'd be able to pass it on with one public hearing. Because time is of the essence, the select board really, we originally wanted this done like by the end of the summer. To have another public hearing would put us back probably another like 3 to 5 weeks. And then the select board starts getting into town meeting reimagined and the budget and all those other things. So ideally, the real work of modifying the red line should happen. So if you have lingering comments yourself or things that you're processing from your neighbors or from the public or from your notes, the best time to feed that to Chris is like right now, especially enough in advance of September 15th. So that red line, that September 15th red line is as good as we can get it. Okay, any other questions on that? Of course, it's all subject to change. Every meeting we've put up a timeline, and every meeting the timeline has changed. So tonight, our goal is to review the comments that we received at the open house and through the online survey, and as a planning commission, as a body, identify themes, concerns, feedback that we heard, and especially hone in on things on direction that we might want to give to Chris without exploring any changes to the recommendations that we have on the table at the moment. So this slide summarizes the general comments, and I first should say, before we really dig into the details, that I was really pleased with the event that Chris organized, and I especially appreciate Sabina bringing flowers and bringing snacks. I thought we created a very welcoming environment. And for a gorgeous Tuesday night in the middle of the summer, I came here thinking we were going to have 3 people here, literally. And I think that the graphics that were produced, the explanations, the materials, the promotion of the events, Sabina had put us in touch with communications consultant that helped us prepare high quality materials, and really appreciate everyone's efforts to organize such a, what I felt like was a really effective, conversation rich event. And really thank members of the public, our neighbors and residents who came and demonstrated interest in our work and asked a lot of good questions and challenged us and gave us good feedback.
I'll just add that if anyone's watching this, the materials that were on display at the open house are hanging on the wall by the town clerk's office, and they're available for people to look at during business hours from now through the end of August. So you can have another opportunity to look it over if you couldn't make it to the open house.
Chris also is going to, had said that he needs to have close the public comment period at the end of August, which I think the date he set was August 29th. It's on the August 28th. It's on the website and it's on the survey. So this is his summary of what the general comments were, and that this was compiled based on all the comment. We all contributed our notes and our observations to Chris ahead of tonight's meeting, and he summarized them here to say that these were sort of the 4 basic themes of general comment, that there was general support for creating more housing opportunities or flexible ways that people could use and develop their land, and an appreciation that those changes are specifically designed to try and make it more accessible for younger families, older adults, and future generations. We heard mixed views on exactly how that would happen and how much that would happen and how fast that would happen. So there was some excitement, like this isn't enough, these buildings aren't big enough, this isn't going fast enough, and some concern, this is too much change, this isn't why I moved here, and a lot of concern about maintaining Jericho's rural open landscape while accommodating additional housing. And I think people appreciated that the Planning Commission was trying to strike that balance. And we used the word balance on purpose in a lot of the text and the posters to get that message across. We heard concerns about infrastructure, every kind of infrastructure, not just wastewater. Water, wastewater, roads, bike ped, facilities, as a key consideration before additional development. And this came through to me when I was reading some of the comments from the online surveys, that the residents seem to be saying, you need to figure out how the infrastructure is, where it's going to be, what it's going to be, and when it's going to be built before necessarily opening things up so much. So it was a little bit of a question of, is this the cart before the horse? So we're focused right now on zoning, but they were like, wait, hold the phone. If all this zoning gets adopted and then there's a lot of development before we really nail down some of the infrastructure questions, that will lead to no bike ped in new neighborhoods. It will lead to traffic. It will lead to people having high expenses for water lines and individual wastewater systems. So I thought that was kind of like a good common sense takeaway from people who are not involved in the everyday work. And then we heard questions and suggestions about the practical issues, since the property taxes was top of mind for many of the participants. There were a lot of questions about, like, how would this 8-unit prop or multiple buildings on a lot, how would the property taxes work for that? Or who's going to own this? And what about rental versus ownership? And how is it going to be fair? And how is transportation going to be improved? So those were the general comments. Does anybody, the Planning Commission, is there anything big and glaring that you think is missing from this kind of like big picture takeaway summary?
No, Heidi's shaking her head no.
Okay.
I had a question about the document that we said that we received that was all of the comments.
Mm-hmm.
That was from the survey, or is that from somewhere else?
I thought that was all the survey comments.
Okay. And so that each response is from a unique individual, or is it possible? I'm trying to figure out, like, in terms of like the degree to which one person has expressed an opinion once, or was it showing up multiple times under multiple headers?
Right. He didn't really differentiate that in the document, but I think you could surmise that some of those responses are the same person giving the same concern to multiple questions.
Okay.
Yes. We have how many responses so far? Do you remember?
Well, people who filled it out online as a standalone thing there are 13 people, but we also had them doing it on paper here at the meeting, and I know that people were putting them back in the box. So
Right.
I don't know how many returned questionnaires he got on the night of the open house.
Right.
So
Right.
it's 13 plus whatever.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, moving on. So now he's going into a little bit more detail about the feedback for each individual area, and he organized it by zoning district, since that was kind of the paradigm he organized for the event. So for village centers, there was support for expanding housing choices and more opportunities. There was mixed opinions on the density and the size of multi-unit buildings. And that's where it was kind of like some people were like, they should be bigger, and some people were like, they're too big. So that was kind of a mixed set of opinions. These were the issues around infrastructure were key concerns, and questions about implementation, timeline. So some of these are also, I think, good feedback for us to think about our communications over the next 6-8 weeks, that we know that people are asking about implementation. So as we are rolling out more information, we probably want to surround it with more about timeline. This is zoning, it's not building, so forth. For the commercial district.
Can I ask a question? So
Yeah.
the mixed opinions on sizes, was that based on the 5 to 9 unit being permitted in the village centers? What is that? What size? On what basis were those size concerns made?
Are they responding to Wisdom House?
So what the poster said, I think it had the current details for Riverside and Jericho Corners, which is basically 10 units and above. And then it's specific that those were already in place. That's the current regulation. And then the change was for Jericho Center from 5 to 9. But I don't know how you felt, but in my conversations with people, it was less about like, oh, this number here for this location is too big or too small. It was more general, like that some people felt like the sizes of things and not so much, I don't know about the number of units, the sizes of things are larger than what they would have thought or what they would have wanted. And in other cases, some people felt like it was smaller than what they would want and what they expected.
And just looking at the comments, one saying Jericho Center is too small for 9-unit buildings, and then someone else is saying increase to 16-unit buildings, promote triplex. So I think that's where he's getting at the mix.
Right.
Okay.
And that's really the primary change that we have on the table in this red line for Jericho
because
Center.
everything else
Every
we
other
village center we've already done.
Right.
The Jericho Center was the only,
But we didn't have any graphic presentations of buildings.
No.
It was just numbers, okay.
Yeah, he had his illustrations
Yeah.
with each section,
Okay.
Okay, then the commercial district was general support for the changes that were presented, support for mixed-use development, and support for including housing as an explicit purpose. But then there were comments about coexistence. So there were comments like, well, am I going to have a right to can I have an industrial business, but then I'm next to a house, or I could have a house and then somebody could bring in an industrial business. So then one comment was about smaller homes. We heard the comment here from the public one evening in the planning commission meeting with the opinion that we should be, based on our community, that we should be prioritizing home ownership and not so much rental housing. I think that's not the position of the planning commission. And also we explained in that evening that it's not, the zoning doesn't determine who owns and who lives in a particular house. But they also, there was support for incentives for mixed use development. And then there was questions about first floor commercial, second floor residential, and would that be allowed? And yes, that it's currently allowed. And a suggestion for the community recreation center. We saw that in the comments as well. So general support, some questions. And I think your questions about numbers and who, and are they not so much who, but is it being repeated so it comes across as like a groundswell opinion, but it's really one or two people over and over. My impression from my conversations and my reading it is that these kind of mixed, where he has mixed opinions or comments or questions, is that they were somewhat of an outlier. That the majority of the comments, the majority of the conversation seemed to think like this was a good direction. Okay. So for the village district, general support for the changes and expanding housing options, interest in smaller homes and for small families or young professionals, people starting out, older residents wanting to downsize, questions about standards which would apply and when development might occur. There were some questions about a little bit about like the zoning administrator versus the DRB, and would there be hearings and would there be notices? And so because we're talking to people who are not that familiar with the procedures, when they're looking at a change, they're thinking about all of the impacts of that. And then, so didn't really seem like anything jumped out there as a controversy. For low density residential, there seemed to be general support for the changes, some questions about the impacts of smaller lots, and including the need and benefit of using PUDs to protect natural resources. And so if the lot sizes are going to be significantly smaller, will PUDs still be opted for? Would we still have the benefit of open space set aside? Like, how would that work? And how would it work with private wells and private septics? And then the last point there says including suggestions to include incentives for cluster development, allowing ADUs, short and long-term rentals, which are already allowed, and expanding trails and pedestrian connections.
So about the concerns about PUDs, was the sense that people wanted PUDs to be used to preserve open space, or did they think PUDs were onerous and they would rather not have to use them?
I don't know. I can't answer that. I know that Chris has said in our meetings that the lot size reduction in low density residential, he would anticipate fewer PUDs.
Yeah.
And I think we recognize that.
Yeah. And then this is not part of this, we don't need to go into this in any depth, but the short-term rentals makes me wonder if at some point, we're not burdened by those right now, but a lot of towns are. And so at some point, we may need to revisit that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So for the rural agricultural residential district, unlike the previous ones that we just looked at, where every bullet point started out with like general support, general support, general support, this one, the summary of all the comments there was mixed support. So there were mixed views on the changes, with support for smaller lots and support for having more options, but concerns about the scale of development in rural areas. Like, why are we encouraging and inviting more development outside in the rural areas? There were a lot of questions because the rural ag was where those smaller PUDs, multiple houses on a lot, were presented within that context. And also, I think those ideas that we presented sort of have the most opportunity, but are potentially the most, raise the most amount of questions. And I know, like, I was at that board for a while and I didn't have it like cemented in my head exactly every single detail. So I tried to keep the conversation at a pretty high level, but people did have questions about, like, well, how would this work? And who would own the land? And how many lots would it be? And so there are questions about how the regulations would apply, including, like, how would subdivision work? How would the land be set aside for working land or agriculture or open space? This is where we heard a decent. I was in that side of the room, so I guess I had more conversations about it. But there were a lot of concerns about the cart before the horse, in having these zoning and development before there's infrastructure. And I think the backdrop of property taxes, the backdrop of traffic, the backdrop of speeding and pedestrian safety, just there were the most amount of questions about, like, is this really this what we want to do? But a lot of people liked the idea of being able to create one or two smaller lots from a parcel, and liked the idea that smaller lots did a better job of not requiring 10 acre, 10 acre, 10 acre, 10 acre for every single site. And we were also explaining how the density would work, which is basically still the same as it works now. So there was support for ideas to incentivize small homes. There were some concerns about clusters. Lots of people that I talked to really thought clustering made the most sense. There were concerns about larger multi-unit buildings in these areas and impacts on wells, open space, and septic system. And then for the forestry district, similarly mixed views, even maybe potentially even more so. Like, if the purpose of this district is really to set aside land for forested land, then why would there be any development there, like, at all, which we talked about in a previous meeting. So there were concerns about creating smaller lots, and then is that really consistent with the purpose of the district? There were concerns about smaller clusters of homes, but doing that without a town-wide water system would potentially lead to future issues, and questions about how forestry and ag would be protected from nuisance complaints if you sort of plop down housing right into the middle of those areas. So as we expected, and as we as a planning commission have discussed and deliberated and debated and heard public feedback on, we are striving for a balance in these areas. And I think these are good questions. Again, it's important, like, is this one person? Is this a dozen people? So I think his summary, he's pretty clear. One concern, one question is like, this is one person, whereas mixed views is really a summary of looking at dozens of comments and having dozens of conversations. He also did say that people have come to visit him in town hall, a number of people, not just one or two people, either because they couldn't come to the open house or as a follow-up to the open house. Okay. So the open house itself, we had more than 40 residents participate. Most of them were here in person. MMC TV did film. We did have people watching online. We've had people now fill out the survey online, and he's saying here several people have come in and given him feedback and suggestions and recommendations. And here we're summarizing the Planning Commission, what we summarized for him. And since we weren't all privy to everybody's conversations and everybody's notes, they're summarized here that there was general support for the recommendations, especially for flexibility and lots of options, strong interest in smaller lots and multiple buildings on a lot. And people understood that that would not change how density is calculated, but it changes how you can use and configure your lot. We heard concerns about growth. Is it too fast? Is it too slow? Infrastructure. Is it, if it's not now, then when? And do you really want this before you've answered your infrastructure questions? Traffic, taxes, and impact on rural areas. Questions about how things would work and how the timing would work. And the rural housing concepts generated both interest and concern, especially around cluster development and open space, which is pretty ironic because if you remember, I read our mission statement at the very beginning when I said we charted our course a year ago. And a year ago, we said our mission was to incentivize clustered development and balance it with protecting open spaces. And that's kind of exactly where we are today.
So
Does anybody hear things that are not reflected in anything I've said so far?
the concerns about cluster development were what? The concerns I heard, I can start by that. I had someone who lives on Skunk Hollow who was very concerned about adding cluster development out there and increasing traffic on what is already not a safe road. So that was a concern that I heard. Were there other concerns that people heard about cluster development?
I heard similar concerns about, but different roads, Silly Hill, Nashville Road. That are we requiring them to be too close together? Are we what if the existing house is set back from the road? And if we require a shared, it was more like the technicality of it.
Mm-hmm.
If we required a shared driveway, that might be actually more fragmentation rather than allowing a second driveway that could be super close to the road. So I don't know, the concerns I heard were more around implementation. Like the regulations need to be flexible enough and focused on the outcome that we're trying to achieve, and less like this is how you have to do it, because every site is different, every property's goals are different.
So it's more concerned about how to do it than opposition to the concept. I mean, some opposition based on traffic, but
I mean, I heard more concern about how to do it than opposition to it. The opposition I heard wasn't about cluster development per se. It was more that if there's going to be development, first of all, if there's going to be development in these areas, which some people did not agree with, plenty of people did not agree with. But if there's going to be development there, then yes, clustered makes the most sense. If it can be flexible enough to work and and the regulations aren't so heavy-handed that nobody can even do it. So like great idea, but it's not practical. I would say that was my takeaway. I would be interested to hear if other people had a similar thought or similar feedback.
I can chime in for a quick second on that. I had a number of conversations with people who were looking for that idea of clustered development, but it was basically more around the ADU type of clustering for an existing property they had and whether or not it could work, and would it be allowed here or somewhere else that they were living near. It wasn't opposition. It was more of, gee, I wish I could have known about this, say, 10 years ago when I might have been more willing to do it, but I'm not as open to it today. I did hear also some discussions from other folks about if we're going to develop in some of the areas that are currently RAR or forestry, it should be clustered rather than spread out in more 10-acre lots. That did seem to be a pretty repetitive theme that came up.
Yeah, Eric, I would say that's consistent with what I heard as well. Okay, anything else missing from this list? Or anything that you heard that really doesn't sync at all with what you have seen so far on any of these slides? Okay. This is just a same slide. It was duplicated. So as Sabina said, the open house display boards are up on the wall at the town clerk's office, which was great because a lot of people were coming in to vote in the primary. So I think it got a lot of visibility. The QR code is there. I think I will do a post on Front Porch Forum this week and encourage people to go to the website, fill out the survey. Because I don't know I'll put that until later. I had a question, but I'm gonna hold my question. Okay.
I had a comment about the open house itself.
Sure.
So I think this would be impossible probably, but if we knew it was going to be that well attended, I think we might have been better off in a bigger space because it was loud.
It was loud, yeah.
A little hard to communicate at times. The crowdedness was kind of nice because it generated some energy, but a bigger space would have been nice, I thought.
Yeah. That's a good problem to have.
It is. And then I was thinking again of the one we had about the town plan at MMU and how, that was sort of spread out.
Yeah.
We had more people there, but it was also spread out.
Yeah.
Nice
We might have been able to, I think we might have been able to spread out even in here a little bit more. Like you can circulate from the lobby into here and out again. And that might have helped a little bit to sort of distribute it a little bit more.
Yeah, or we could have had the
greeting
registration,
table.
but the greeting table could have been in the hall.
Yeah.
And then, giving people a sort of a sense of where to go next. Okay, ready?
Yeah. So these are actually kind of the more meaty pieces of not meaty, but more specific pieces of feedback were primarily from the zoning administrator, the town attorney, and the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission. And the two topics and this is, I think, where we have the most work to do on drafting the changes. So the first one was multiple principal buildings on one lot, and the second one was creating smaller lots in the rural ag residential district and the forestry district. So for multiple buildings on a lot, the feedback was to simplify the review process. And if you recall, Chris had brought to us the recommendation to create this concept of a minor PUD. And the minor PUD would be used in these two circumstances. And we've worked through some of the feedback, and he and I have talked a bit about the language that is it possible to not introduce a new type of PUD, but instead just incorporate these flexible options into the standard either subdivision or depending, like the second one in the subdivision, but this one in the in the standard regulations. And that way the zoning administrator would be able to process it administratively. And the suggestion from CCRPC was to potentially remove an open space requirement, because in some ways it's kind of at odds with encouraging someone, like Eric was just mentioning about ADUs or a guest house or a second house or an in-law house, and like burdening that kind of true clustered development with an open space requirement could be too much of a deterrent. And there already is a decent amount of open space built in to the different districts based on their densities. And so that seemed to be something that could potentially be removed as from the recommendation, because it's not really currently it is there because you have to do a PUD, but taking it out of the PUD world and removing the open space requirement.
So would it be an administrative approval?
Yes. And it would be an administrative approval.
Maybe here's a question.
Heidi. Thank you, Sabina.
Yeah, thank you, Sabina. Thank you, Susan. I just want to make sure that I'm following, because just when I read this the first time, preparing for this meeting, I know this left-hand column, multiple principal buildings on one lot, does not refer to a particular zone or a particular area, whereas the one on the right is very particular to the rural agriculture forestry. So the multiple principal buildings on one lot, is that in a particular part of the town or all parts?
It would be all parts except Riverside.
All parts. Thank you. I just wanted to make sure I was following correctly. Okay.
And the only reason I'm accepting Riverside is because Riverside has its own standards, so to speak. So yes, it would be in all zones. And this is currently an option. It's that you have to do a PUD, and SJ has challenged this consistently, and especially the open space requirement. Okay, the second one is the proposal the recommendation that we've been trialing out there among ourselves and with the public and with CCRPC was to use this new idea of a minor PUD to allow a small lots to be created from a single 10-acre parcel in rural ag or forestry district. And again, we were looking at it that we already have subdivision regulations that the need to trigger a PUD review. CCRPC's recommendation was to also simplify that and to just make it a fixed number of small lots, that there wouldn't be a time period. So it wouldn't be, you know how we had before that it would be like every 5 years or every 10 years or whatever. And they said, just keep it simple. It would just be a one time from one originating parcel. But Chris and I talked about it, like, how would you do that if you weren't ready to do it all at once, but you wanted to do it incrementally. So he doesn't really know the details yet of how to draft this. But he was looking for feedback from us about it. So they also said that their recommendation was that the maximum size of the new smaller lots to be created would be up to, let's say, a half acre. I can't quite read it on the screen. And once again, to remove the requirement for open space. So that would still make this option available, but it would make it probably much easier for somebody to take advantage of it. I think this is still a subdivision though, so this would still be a DRB review, but there would not be an open space requirement.
What did we propose for the maximum small lot size?
1 acre.
So that phrase says consider maximum smaller lot up to,
Half acre.
making it smaller than the 1 acre.
Right.
Okay. Shouldn't that be a minimum
No.
or maximum? So it can't be bigger than half an acre.
Right. So the first option is if you're not going to subdivide, you just want up to 3 buildings on your lot. But you want to keep your lot owned. But it's agnostic about who owns the buildings. Is it one owner? Is it multiple owners? Is it the same owner as the land? Doesn't matter. Or it's silent on that. It's agnostic. It doesn't differentiate. In the second case, there's actually a subdivision. So it's separating it out.
It feels like the second is really like this no open space requirement in the rural agriculture and forestry feels like a bigger change from where we had been talking on the having no open space requirement. There's sort of my feedback and compared to where we've been in our conversations. I feel like that's a big shift from where we've been, other than, as Susan, you say, SJ's sort of push all along for this. So I'm just wondering how other members of the planning commission, are you feeling like that's different too?
Wait. SJ was pushing for no open, she was advocating that, or she was questioning the wisdom of an open space requirement related to multiple buildings on a lot.
Right, but not in the rural agriculture, right?
Yeah. So asking about the not requiring an open space requirement, I think that came from CCRPC. And my understanding of that is that if you are creating small lots with a small maximum size, and you're still in a rural area, and you're not increasing the density, in effect, you are still having land undeveloped, but that undeveloped land doesn't have to be deeded as open space. So the development pattern remains the same and remains open, and the density remains the same. So you wind up with the open space that is the value, but you would reduce the burden of achieving that outcome, is my understanding. And I also feel a little bit dangerous because, like I said, I don't have this like completely in my head. And to be honest, Chris doesn't either, because he hasn't really worked through this all yet. So our feedback is really important to him at this point in time. And like the public, we're like, well, how would this work? And what would that matter? I'm also not 100%, I don't have 100% clarity on exactly how the density calculation works.
Is this related to what we were talking about requiring that these be clustered before?
Yes. So there's a third option, which is not on this slide, which was the small house. And that, I think it's on the next slide.
But this summary of recommendations from different people doesn't mention anything at all about clustering. Does that mean that would no longer be part of this, or does that mean that they weren't questioning that?
Yes, they weren't questioning that. This is just a summary of things that they said of what we had put on the table. Maybe you should reconsider.
And were they suggesting we reconsider what the maximum number allowed is?
No, because I think our maximum number allowed for creating small lots was 3. And multiple buildings on a lot, 3. And the current standard
I
was
thought the
to
cluster
say
development was 8.
that's small house. That's the third type that's not on this slide. Right, so I think overall, the takeaway is it's too complicated. Like, good ideas, trying to, work through, but it's too complicated. So now we have to say, what did we learn? What are we trying to achieve? What were all the good ideas? How can we now keep the best of it and simplify it?
So how does, again, how in the option on the right, you could create up to 3 small lots. Doesn't that inherently change the density?
No, because that's what I'm saying. In my understanding, the density would still be the same.
But
It
if
doesn't matter. Sorry, Chris.
But if it's a 10-acre lot size, does that mean you'd have to have 30 acres in order to do that? Because that doesn't make sense.
Well, we just don't know at this point,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
I mean,
I have a
we
lot
just
of
have to save
questions.
these questions for Chris when he gets back.
But if he spends a lot of time sinking time into developing this concept for the 15th, because we're not gonna see him again until the 15th.
But we can talk to, he's back on the 31st of August. So, and we can communicate with him one-on-one with questions that he can hopefully answer for us. He's not working on it now.
Right, he's not
He's
working
on
on it now.
vacation.
Yeah.
Right. There's a part of me that feels that this is a departure from where we were going, and I'm thinking about alignment of purpose of the districts, and because we have so many questions and it's vague because it's bullet points and this feels like it's complicated, that I would want to have a discussion with Chris prior to him sinking time into it.
Like meeting on the 1st.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. And
Part-
or asking Chris, like, is this really a departure? Because that's where I was sort of with Wendy when I was asking, like, that the right-hand column for me felt much further away from things we've been talking about compared to the left-hand one. Like the left-hand one, like,
The left one is that, yeah, I get it. It makes sense. Yeah, I'm with you.
right. But the right-hand one, I think I agree with you that I would want more information from Chris to like share with him that this is feeling less clearly aligned with where we had been. So we would, it's harder to say, yet this is, we feel comfortable that it is maintaining the planning commission's overall direction, which it seems like the header says.
And the part that seems like the most significant departure is removing the open space requirement.
Not for me. My question is more about the density. I think it's that.
Right. My understanding about the density is that the density remains the same. So
But I guess I don't, the density, if you look at the example on the left, the density does not remain the same because you're adding, if you've got one house on 10 acres, you can add a second house on that 10 acres. The density is not the same.
Well, in rural ag, you can have 2 units per 10 acres. So you could add a second house on one 10-acre lot.
Then each one can add an ADU.
Yeah,
So that's not changing the density.
right. And then if you wanted to add a third house, then you would need 20 acres. And if you had 20 acres, it could be a fourth house.
Okay, and then an example on the right.
Okay, and then the example on the right, which is why I think that they were suggesting about no open space requirement, you were saying like, if you wanted to do, and he's saying, allow creating a fixed certain number of small lots. And what Chris had put on the table previously, that we had previously organized around was 3. So 3 principal buildings, 3 small lots, and then the other one that went from 4 to 8 is a different kind of an animal. So under 4. So if here, the density in rural ag is 2 units per 10 acres, and you had currently, if you had 30 acres, you would be required to subdivide that into 3 10-acre lots. Right? Okay. If you didn't want to do 3 10-acre lots, you would have to do a PUD. And you would have to set aside 50%, which is 15 acres. And then you would be able to have 6 units, because it's 2 per 10, on your other 15 acres. And the standard PUD has dimensional standards, and I think the minimum lot size for PUD in rural ag is 1 acre. But that requires PUD, which we had heard is potentially complicated, potentially burdensome. So Chris had gone through this idea of like doing a minor PUD, and now he's going even further and saying, if you have 30 acres, instead of requiring you to subdivide into 3 10-acre lots, which is more fragmentation, that you would be allowed to create smaller lots that are up to half acre each, and you would not be required to set aside open space because you don't have any more density potential on that lot anyway.
So after you create these 3 smaller lots, this is saying that you cannot subdivide again?
No, it's not. Well, it's not. It depends on how much land you have.
Right. Uh-huh.
And
Well,
Let's stick to the 30
acres.
30 acres.
Yeah.
If you used all, let's say the number is 3,
Yeah.
if you used all 3 of them, then that would be the time that you'd be allowed to use this particular tool. Is a one-time tool.
One time, so I have 30 acres. I say I want to make 3 lots that are half acre each. Do that, and then I can never do anything again with my remaining acreage.
That doesn't seem quite right. And it seems,
Does that mean like I'm misinterpreting it, or does that mean?
no, I think correctly interpreted.
Okay.
I think you're interpreting correctly, but I'm questioning the
Yeah,
regulation.
yeah.
And I guess it seems ironic to me that if the maximum lot size is a half acre, you're requiring someone to have 10 acres to get there. There's something seems really ironic about that, because the whole point of a small lot is that it doesn't take up as much land. And so I guess it brings me back to, I guess, questioning again if there wants to be some flexibility on the density or some other way to fashion that. If I have 10 acres and because you're essentially, you're punishing somebody. Somebody could do it on the left. If they had 10 acres, they could add another principal building, but they couldn't give that building its own piece of land. That doesn't seem right. I mean, because it's the same density, but you're not allowing the second house owner to own the land that the house sits on.
Well, if you wanted to do that, then you would do this other option.
But you couldn't. Well, you could do it. I guess could you do it with one? I guess you could do it with one house, but you couldn't do it with two.
And one thing this does create, though, Chris, is if you've got those 30 acres that are zoned for 10, and you want to subdivide it into 3, and 25 of those 10 acres are basically undevelopable, it allows you to put up those 3 houses and preserve the rest of the space. So it creates an option where one may not be. They could be undevelopable because it's a deer yard or because it's prime ag or whatever it is, but you can't put anything on it. So this opens a door for a person who has that kind of property to actually put in 3 units as a subdivision within there. Creates an opportunity rather than blocking one. If I'm reading it the way I think I'm reading it.
How many parcels are there in rural ag that are 30 acres and more?
I don't know, but I'm explaining it like I'm defending it, but I'm not defending it. And I'm also really doing a poor job of explaining it because I don't actually know the answers. I looked at this though, and I wasn't sure that is the solution simpler to have the PUD standard have a smaller lot size and have a density bonus for a PUD that achieves a density of what you're talking about, and that continues to have a 50% or more open space set aside. Like we didn't hear from O'Leary and Burke that PUDs were a problem. We didn't hear from Joe Flynn that PUDs were a problem. We didn't hear PUDs are used all the time, and 99.9% of them sail through the DRB. And are we like potentially overthinking this, and that what we really are trying to achieve is clustered smaller lots, then maybe the PUD lot sizes need to be smaller, and maybe if those things are accomplished, then the density could be higher, but still keep it within the PUD structure. That was kind of what I was thinking.
Maybe it would be helpful to look at the next slide, the
I don't
clustered.
I think so.
Oh,
Oh no.
okay.
I think there was too much
Okay.
feedback on the small house one.
I feel like we should. I don't want to overburden Chris, but I feel like we should maybe meet on the 1st to review a lot of these things, because I agree with Wendy that if we wait till the 15th, we don't agree with something.
Right.
It's too late.
Okay. So does everybody think that's a good idea? Does anybody not think that's a good idea?
I'm fine with it.
Okay, and I think if all we really focus on for that meeting are those couple of slides right there and have a pretty narrow
And the
discussion.
Clustered.
Yeah, the small, I don't know why he didn't include that here. Yeah. Okay, so before we answer this question, I want to give Chuck and Martha, if she's still on, an opportunity to give us some feedback and comments that you obviously came here to provide.
Sure. Thank you.
Chuck's gonna go first.
Oh, Martha, go ahead.
No, I don't think is she still in the?
She's here.
She's
I
there?
don't know if
Okay.
she has any comments.
Yeah, no, go ahead, Chuck.
You know, there's feel like things are going in the right direction.
Wait, can you say that again?
But, however,
Yes.
I've been thinking a lot about the cluster housing. That's the one that I think is most important to the housing committee, though, and I've been, really going through the town lot by lot, on the roads in the ag zone, and really looking at the lots, who owns them, looking at the overlays, just trying to understand, kind of how it's going to happen. And kind of going back to first principles, in terms of what the housing committee was considering, the largest lot size in Richmond is 1 acre. There is no zone that requires more than 1 acre. In West Bolton, it's 2 acres. On taking Route 15 into Essex, it's 3 acres there. There's no lot size in Williston that is more than 80,000 square feet, which is a little under 2 acres. And 70% of Jericho is 10 acres. And so the obvious thing for the housing committee to look at was, well, let's just reduce the lot sizes and be comparable to the other towns. And our kind of conclusion was, well, if we do that, we're just going to get more $1 million houses on 3 acre lots. And I think that the 10 acre zone and that particular type of sprawl is so embedded in Jericho that I think it's going to be hard to change. So that's why we came up with this idea that, well, if we have rural clusters, and our proposal was that you could add, really kind of using the current PUD rules, add an incentive that says you can add as many houses under a certain square footage without having to add additional land. So right now, if you have 10 acres and you want to build 3 houses, you have to add 20 acres, and then you can build, you can build 3 acres. We're saying if you have a lot and you want to build more small houses, you don't have to add more land. The current proposal that I have seen is 8 homes on a footprint of no more than 2 acres, which means that in a 10 acre zone, in a 10 acre lot, you're requiring 80% of the lot to be conserved. On a 19 acre lot, which you can't subdivide, you'd be limited to 8 houses, and you would be requiring that 90% of that lot be conserved. When we're, at the same time, we're building luxury neighborhoods all over Jericho and requiring each of them to conserve 50% of the land. So basically what we're saying, if you got money enough to build a luxury home on one of these luxury lots, the lots above Mills River, there's 115 acres, and the DRB required them to conserve 58. On the project down in Governor Peck in the 3 acre zone, they're required to conserve 50%. The new project on Boulder Hill, the DRB decision is you have to conserve 50%. So what we're saying is if you got enough money, you only have to conserve 50%. But if you're going to be building a small house in one of these clusters, you gotta conserve 80% or 90%. And I just I don't think that's fair. If I think we had envisioned that it would go into the PUD rules, we certainly didn't envision that it would be more restrictive in terms of conservation than a PUD for luxury homes. And what you're proposing is something that is substantially more restrictive. So the current PUD parameters are minimum lot size is 10,000 square feet, which is a quarter of an acre or larger, and 50% of the land being conserved. And I don't think you need to depart from that. Just to give you an idea of what 8 houses on 2 acres looks like, that is the density of the mobile home parks at Fernwood, Riverview Commons, and Williston Woods. That's basically the density of those mobile home parks. And I think that's, it's just consistent with the idea of containing low-income people in a small area, and really kind of, really kind of unnecessary. The second thing is that the number of homes allowed in such a development should be proportional to the acreage. That right now you're saying it's 8 homes and you vision it on 10 acres. But what happens if you have 19? You can't subdivide it and create a 10-acre lot. So there are lots in these zones that are 19 acres, but you're limited to 8 homes when you're allowed to do 8 homes on 10 acres, but then you're still restricted to 8 on 19. And again, I don't, if you were building, again, luxury homes, the number of houses you can build is proportional to the amount of land you've got. And I think the same should be true, in this scenario. The next thing is that and this really comes from my, I'm going lot by lot by lot, going down, Skunk Hollow, Nashville Road, Alpine, Old Pump Road, Plains Road. There are very, very few. Well, there are no vacant 10-acre lots, and there are very few that can be created. There's only one landowner on Skunk Hollow that could create a vacant 10-acre lot through subdivision on the full length of Skunk Hollow. Their lots are either less than 20 acres, so they can't subdivide it, or they're small, they're tiny, or they're not buildable for, which is why they're, why they're still there. What is there is Jericho's preferred sprawl, which is large houses on 10 acres, and that's kind of what's available. I mean, it's almost comical. Alpine Drive, every single house up there is like 10.1 acres. And wooded. A lot of the rural ag land is wooded. So this base case really doesn't exist. Okay, a vacant square lot on good agricultural soil. It's when you think we're in the agricultural zone, you think, well, we're chopping on farms and 10 acres. We're not. We are looking at lots like this. Some are long and skinny, some are kind of like that, some are a little more square, all with a house. And then when I think about who's likely to do this, we have 1,800 single-family homes in Jericho that don't have ADUs. Last year, we built 3 ADUs. So the idea of homeowners wanting to build 8 little houses in their front yard, you're basically someone who's chosen not to build an ADU, who chose to live on an 10-acre lot, with a big house. The idea that they are going to initiate a development like this, have the expertise, have the financing, have the desire, the courage, sort of all that stuff. The likelihood is really low. I think what is going to happen is it's going to be a builder, somebody probably with philanthropic intent, and there really aren't going to be very many of these. Someone with philanthropic intent who buys a lot that has a house on it. That's what's available. And the plan is going to be, I'm going to buy a lot with a house on it for $700,000, $800,000, sell the house for $600,000, and then build this cluster. And it's important that the cluster not be required that the cluster is associated with the existing house, because it's like Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs at that point, and it dramatically reduces probably the marketability of the existing house and increasing the cost of the overall project. And I would also point that in many cases, the existing house is quite a bit into the development, and this is something you probably want to do disassociated from the house and closer to the road. these rural clusters should be allowed on any size lot. And you can have the number of houses be proportional to the size of the lot. When I look at this here, this is pretty typical. It's like, I think like on Nashville Road, Skunk Hollow, Old Pump, more than half the lots are less than 10 acres. So there's just a lot, and those lots are next to the road. And this is pretty typical. And when I look at this and say, okay, this is 4 acres, 10, 14, 10, and 10. There's a lot of lots that are 10.1 acres, around, and they're kind of long and skinny. From a kind of any sort of land use point of view, why would we want to ban doing it here as opposed to here or here or here? I mean, the impact is kind of the same in terms of the land use. And these lots tend to be closer to the road. There are a fair amount of them. They were created before 1975 when the exclusionary zoning came in. So they're likely to be older houses, less expensive, and ultimately a lower cost for someone doing this project. So I think what I would do, I think you should open it up to, certainly the conserved portion should be, no more than 50%. I think it should be, the other thing, so this whole idea is an alternative to smaller lot sizes everywhere. We're saying we as an alternative to lower lot size everywhere, we are going to aggressively promote and incent clusters of small houses. And I think the number of houses should be proportional to the size of the lot. We can't make any more lots less than 10 acres. So it's not like someone's going to game the system. We happen to have a lot of 6, 7, 8, 4-acre lots close to the road, in these zones, and we can't make any more of them, and they have old houses on them. And I don't think the impact on, you can make the argument that the impact is actually less with the smaller lots close to the road.
Okay.
I think the last one is the law requiring electric lines to be buried. It should go away. For half of power lines, you have to dig up the road or do a boring under the road to move the power line from one side to the.
Is that anything
Yeah, that's in our zoning. Yeah,
It's in our zoning.
that new utilities lines have to be buried. You can get a waiver to that if you have to cross a stream or if you have an extenuating.
But you're talking, I really became aware of this building the house for my mother. And I don't know exactly how much it cost because it was buried in a couple other expenses. It wasn't kind of segregated, but it was an enormous expense, $15,000, something like that, to take the line across the road. And there's no resiliency benefit. If the line from across the road to my house goes down, one house goes down. It doesn't affect the grid. Because I buried the line, there are now 25 lines crossing the road in Jericho Center instead of 26. I don't think that is making anybody's day, forcing me to do that. And for a smaller home, the proportion of the cost it's a fixed cost regardless of, whether you're building $1 million home or putting in a tiny home. And I just don't think that, the benefit of there, if they are so offensive that they should be banned, then we should ban them everywhere and maybe start with people whose appraisal is more than $1 million and say you have 5 years to get rid of it because they're just so offensive. At the bottom line is you should know how much it costs people to do that when you're making your own kind of cost benefit decision. This is a lot like the question of requiring sidewalks on both sides of the road, where I think you decided not to do it because you kind of recognize the cost. You have a sense that it is expensive, but this can be an enormous expense. So you should have in your head, okay, we talked to a builder, it's a $10,000 deal. How important is it?
Okay.
for us to do.
Got that point. Okay, Martha. Thank you, Chuck. Could you unmute? Yeah, go ahead.
I just did. So yeah, just on what Chuck was just talking about burying, just because it tagged on to the end. It's extremely expensive to bury power lines. I had looked at a lot, and to move a pole where you could have just plain moved it and placed another pole at another spot, it was like $13,000. In order to bury it, they would have made me go back, and it was $35,000. So there is a huge expense when you're going to bury lines, depending on the grades and whatever. And then on Chuck's, yeah, I guess that when you're looking at people, and of course, I'm going to go to the old farm people like me, taking where I'm at in 1 acre zones that seems to be getting off skew of what I thought was going to happen here in this town plan, but I'll clarify that. But you take the Neal family, or you take the ones that are up on Nashville. So these are farm people, their retirement's tied up in this land, and they're thinking that they were going to be able to do something with it, and they were going to be able to retire. By squelching them and saying, no, you can't do any of this stuff, but yet you go 5 miles down the road. If you want to move your property 5 miles down the road, you can certainly do that, and you could be worth millions, but you're only worth 700,000 5 miles away. So I don't think it's fair to some of the outliers that are in 10 acre zones to be as strict as what they are. Now back to my quandary here, right on Lee River Road. I am wondering where you had the 4 lots within a 10-year period, regardless of who owned it, and the master parcel counted as 1. It's my understanding that you were changing that to 4 lots, and the master parcel did not count as 1, and that you were lowering it to 5 years, and that you were not required to set land aside. So where is that? Where is that change, or how did that move, or did that move, or is that still in the plan?
That's still in the plan, and the only reason we didn't talk about that tonight is because at the moment that's a settled recommendation, and we didn't hear any feedback to challenge that, and we don't have any qualms or questions about how to draft it. We didn't get any technical feedback from CCRPC that wasn't a good idea. So that's why you didn't hear about it tonight, because it's a settled change that will be included in our red line that gets forwarded to the select board as far as.
So that would be like the 4 lots in 5 years.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm going to comment too on one of the things that I mentioned at the meeting over there. My idea here is just because I would prefer, and I was going on 3 acre lots. I'm happy to cut those down to 1 acre lots and squeeze them in. But I still have this, feeling that when a family owns a house and they've got 2 little kids that want to play in the yard, that's what they should be able to do. I mean, they should have their mom and dad and, the 2.2 kids with the dog and cat in the yard with the white picket fence. And if for some odd reason that little boy or little girl wants to drop their trousers out there in the backyard and take a pee, I guess I feel that them having their own private acre lot, that they could be allowed to do that. So it's more of the family that I'm looking for. I don't want huge houses here. I wouldn't even sell a lot to somebody that was going to put some great big monster house, regardless how much money they had. You get a 3 or 4 bedroom small house that hopefully people can afford, and that will bring the kids in that you want. And so that's where I sit. And, I've got the forestry, I've got whatever, but my intention was never to stir up any of my father's sugar woods, unless I absolutely had to. So yes, I'm glad that I appreciate that you clarified that, because every time I'm always afraid that somebody's going to slip that out of there or whatever. So I can make my plans accordingly.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. Okay, so now here's the question that Chris asked us to summarize for him. So I think we're basically saying that we want to understand better the technical recommendations and how that would be incorporated. We have questions about open space. I personally came down very similar to what Chuck just explained, that potentially the small lots could be accomplished within our existing PUD regulations. I think we could potentially clarify that if you have a lot that is the minimum size of the lot in a district, that you should be allowed to do a PUD. And which is not currently clear in our regulations. And that would solve, in my mind, a little bit of what Chuck was explaining. That would be proportional to each district. It would be proportional to each lot size. It wouldn't be having different standards based on small house, big house, small lot, big lot. And I think that the density,
I'll need some
the density can be
food stuff, but his problem is that I put Vaseline on his feet. He can't walk.
that potentially the density calculation within the PUD can welcome more houses onto an existing lot that's already developed.
And I would argue we should consider allowing somebody who has a pre-existing lot that's smaller than 10 acres in a 10-acre zone the same ability. I'm not convinced that they should be handcuffed or punished or whatever because their lot pre-existed the 10-acre zoning. I think there needs to be some allowance for that.
Okay, so we'd like to meet on September 1st. Were there any other, so putting aside, it seems like the those last two tools that we talked about are where the most work remains. Were there any previous feedback or comments that lead you to identify issues that warrant further changes to our recommendations? Or did you sense enough general support that we can go forward drafting what we currently have on the table?
Aside from the
aside
issues.
from that, aside from these big issues that we just talked about tonight, like we didn't have anybody who came in and said, I don't think the load, like you're not sitting here going, okay, we're going to reduce the lot size in the low density residential district from 3 acre to 1 acre. We didn't hear anything that makes us question that. So I guess that's what I'm searching for. Did you hear anything that made you question things that you hadn't previously questioned?
Not that I can think of.
No. Okay, any red flags other than what we just talked about tonight? No. Okay. All right, so then we can move on.
Susan, I do think, and I don't know how it fits here whatsoever, but I do think we have, it would be wise for us to remember now that in some way the context has shifted from when we first started doing this work, right? That we are now in a moment of members of our community feeling particularly stressed and pushed because of the changes in the tax And I don't know where and how that fits, but I feel like I need to like hold that pretty strongly. Like we've been moving along very much with the information that we had from the town plan, which I still think is our guiding light, right? I do think that's our North Star, as they say, or whatever. And I think it just behooves us as we continue our conversations and continue our rollout of whatever we're doing that we recognize that we are hitting a point of a little bit of a collision of releasing whatever we're going to release with a sort of this new heightened moment that we're in. So I don't know what to do about that per se, but I feel it is, we need to just hold that knowledge in the back of our minds and recognize that I don't think we've done anything here that is out of line with what we've heard consistently all the time. But I just want to say that.
Yeah, I agree with you, Heidi. And I guess the way I'm framing it in my own mind is that we are trying to offer new options and new tools so that what Martha was talking about, people who currently can't do anything because the regulations are not flexible enough, that we're hopefully bringing to the table and saying, instead of not being able to do anything, now you have a choice of more options, and hopefully that will make it more affordable for new homes, but it'll also make it more affordable for you as an existing resident. That's a good test for us.
And my response, Heidi, is that I think the town needs to do a lot more to help people understand what their options are. We need to have more open houses or more, we just need to we need to publicize all this more. We need to review, keep reviewing over and over again what the zoning changes are and what the options are. We should make resources available for people to help people understand, what does it mean to subdivide? What's that process look like? What is the septic on my lot? What does that mean? What are my options? We need to I think the town could help a lot more, and that would answer, I think these zoning changes, the timing of it, and I was talking to Chris about this, the timing of it is really perfect, because we could have been just starting these zoning changes in response to the tax coming out. But in fact, we're about to roll out these changes, which will really help people all over town and give people a lot more options. So I think the answer is largely to just help people through the process.
Absolutely. Like Chuck was saying, only 3 ADUs last year. I talked to 3 specific people who did not know what an ADU was. They didn't know that they could already potentially build it on their property. I did have to explain to them, depends on what your septic capacity potentially is, but I think you're right. Like we can create all the options in the world, and if nobody hears about them, then it doesn't really matter. Yes, Chuck.
I think a presentation to the real estate agents that work Jericho would be helpful.
That's a really
good idea.
They could
be really making sure that people looking at places can understand the full potential, because I think a lot of this stuff happens sort of at the point of transition. They could be talking to someone who's thinking about selling and sort of
and I think it would be great if there was a realtor or two who would be willing to chat with somebody, free of charge, saying,
they're all willing to chat.
What are the implications of doing these 4 different options that I have? Yeah. Anyway.
I think also the school board won't do it, but everybody else needs to tell people that the number one thing we can do to moderate our school tax is more children.
So
and the school board won't say it for some reason, but everybody needs to understand that.
I had specific conversations with people about that. They were like, people came in, they were like, why do we need more housing? And explaining that about the schools below capacity.
62% of capacity.
Yes.
We no longer need 2 middle schools. We have an elementary school with 54 children in it and another one with 80. When we talk about restructuring the school system in Vermont, they are talking about us. The new state law requires us to study merging with CVU because of what's happening here.
Well, thank you. I think you all are making a super compelling case for why that this actually is quite timely. And so, yeah, thank you. I'm glad we had this conversation.
Okay, so does anybody now move on to liaison updates? Does anyone have any updates from their liaison roles? Did anybody go to the Davis Farm?
Heidi and I were there on Sunday. That was a great day. I mean, just flat out a great day. And then, I don't know, it was just really wonderful.
It was fantabulous. And I think one of the things I asked people as they were leaving, because I was on dishwashing duty, so I got to basically see everybody as they were leaving, was, did you meet anybody new? And so many people said yes, like they actually met somebody new. So I think just in terms of like community building and these spaces of being able to know one another separate from a meeting that builds, as they call it, like the social capital and the goodwill in a community, it was really lovely.
Right. Heidi and I also went to a workshop last week on a concept called the well-being economy. That was very interesting. We don't have to get into it now and here, but I think it was time well spent. Did you think it was time well spent, Heidi? Yeah.
I'm super glad I went. It was where it was held was really interesting because it was a alternative agriculture sort of community space, and really along the same line of like, how can we invest in local agriculture and community building? And so that was lovely. And then the concepts were super interesting. I'm looking forward to hanging out with Sabina and just sort of figuring out what we can bring together that was like relevant to this particular work, but it felt like there were some gems that might help us just think differently and embed the values that we've been talking about for a while.
The Bicycle and Pedestrian Connectivity Committee is installing a bunch of new bike racks, and we're going to get one here in front of the town hall. And there's one, I think, at the community center in Jericho Center. And then I think I heard them say maybe one at the Ale and Bean. So all around town in public and private places. So
where are they with writing? Weren't they going to write a plan, a 5 or 10 year plan?
Glad you asked.
Oh, yeah.
Do you know the answer to that?
Well, I have suggested, and Eric and Paula and Chris all think is a good idea, that we put together a goal, a set of goals for the bike ped group with dates attached, and sit down with them and say, okay, here's what we need. Here's when we need it by. How can we help you do it? And Chris said, maybe we get somebody from CCRPC to help us. Maybe we get some other consultant, whatever it takes, we need to do it because we can't keep waiting. And so I think that's the next task for some group of us, or with Chris or somebody, to say, here's the list, here are the dates, let's make it happen.
Just to put on your radar that our next joint meeting with the select board is in September. I think it's the third week-ish of September. And I'll be working with Chris and a little bit with Eric Johnson for an agenda for that. I know that the group that started to work on developing a more long-term, robust capital plan hopes to use the time with the planning commission and the select board at that meeting to share what they've come up with and the capital planning projects that they've identified so far and get people's feedback on it. will be before our hearing, so we could potentially use some of the time to review the zoning with them, although I don't know that that's like the best use of everybody's time, because Chris could do that at a select board meeting, or we might not even be ready for that. So if you have other thoughts and ideas of good ways to use the time together with the select board.
I think it would be great if we could have just some strategic planning, because the last meeting we had was not strategic planning. I can't remember even what it was about. It was not. Anyway, I think it would be really great if it could be a strategic planning meeting that maybe goes out 5 years or something tied to the capital plan, but so that we all had a shared sense of priority and order and sequence. I think that would be the best use of that time, in my opinion.
So that might be another thing that we could talk about a little bit more with Chris on September 1st. I know that he's concerned he won't have any time to prepare for that meeting. So by having a meeting, that means I have to figure out about getting the agenda posted and all of that while he's gone, which I can do. But so those would be the two topics, would be to revisit this zoning stuff that we talked about tonight and potentially do a little bit more planning for the select board meeting.
Is there? I'm just looking at
The calendar.
the calendar. I mean, what about the 8th, which is the following Tuesday?
Instead of the 1st,
Yeah,
that would actually be, that's a
that's
really,
the day after Labor Day weekend.
Yeah, that's the other scheduling thing I was going to point out is you mentioned possibly another, like were you thinking a Saturday open house?
Well, I think based on what we talked about tonight, so now let's move on to other business. How about that? Do we want, I think Chris was kind of inclined to think that we did not necessarily need to host another open house.
Well, the only thing I was going to say is that the select board is considering having an earlier meeting for the first part of the TMRI.
Right, so we talked to them about that September 12th date to the TMRI people.
Yeah.
Sabina cleared it, wasn't that you? Cleared it with them? That there was not a conflict, they were
Okay.
not having their meeting by then.
Right.
So are you saying that because you just don't want to collide on the date, or you think we should coordinate somehow?
Well, we should at least at minimum be aware of the other things. And then I don't know if there's a maximum appetite for people of Saturday morning meetings, or I don't know if that's an issue or not, but.
Well, do you agree, I guess, do people think we need another open house of the same format of what we just did? Or do we need something different, or we don't need something? The something different could be if the TMRI meeting is before our hearing on September 6th, we could have a simple table there and engage people and give out information. By then, though, he'll have public comments basically closed. So that would be more of just like giving information, whereas the open house, we were receiving. I mean, I guess we would still be receiving because it'll be before our hearing. So it's kind of like having comments as if they were coming to the hearing.
I think what was so effective and powerful about the open house is that people felt like they still had a voice, like we hadn't already gotten so close to the end that it was too late. So I think that was a really positive. So I guess I think another open house would be great if we could get a different group of people. But I don't know. There's no way to know that. And
there's no way to know that. And I'm a little, to tell you the truth, I am a little worried about bandwidth.
yeah,
I think
it's necessary, but
yeah, like we have a new town administrator starting. Everyone's going to be meeting and talking with her. So Chris is going to have a lot on his plate. If we meet instead on September 8th, then that gives him, sort of a shorter amount of time to integrate any of our final comments on those last two issues. But I don't think that's a problem because I think he will have been able to maybe think through it a bit. And I could also let him know, like, don't nail down those last two pieces until we meet. But I think, so would people be okay to meet on the 8th?
I could do either the 1st or the 8th.
Could do the first.
And Heidi and Eric, could you do the 1st or the 8th?
Either one's fine with me.
Okay, so that's a quorum. There.
Just please don't go super late on the 8th because I've got a really early flight the next day.
Okay, I think for Chris, it seems like the 8th would be a lot better. And then also, we can maybe talk to him, I can talk to him in the interim and explain to him this conversation, and maybe some things can be clarified through email in the interim also. Okay, so back to the open house. So you kind of think we don't have to have it. I'm worried about bandwidth. I'm open to doing something else that's maybe a little lighter weight, but still is kind of like putting the information out there in the community and allowing people to provide comments that could be brought forth to the hearing.
Yes, I also think well, it's not really related. Because you're talking about bandwidth between now and the 1st of early October, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I was just going to say that we could put that energy into, an open house to help people understand the zoning changes.
Right.
And maybe that's later, but
right,
that's fine. But that might be a better use of that energy.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Chris, do you mean, should it be passed? Explain them. Should it be adopted by the select board? Do an open house to explain changes to help folks see options?
Once it's passed, have an open house and say, here's what's new.
Okay.
Tell us where you live. Here's what the
means.
options. Yeah,
Okay.
here's what it means to you, and here's how this could help you.
Yeah.
I do think I like where you're going, Chris, and sort of what you said and Chuck said before about like how it would be just really helpful, I think, to individuals because to have someone who can answer their very specific question, right? Because my noticing of anytime we do an open house is people come like, here's my house, what does it mean for me? And I don't know that the format of the open house is the only or best way to have that answered. But that is, so I think an open house requires a certain amount of planning energy as well as participation energy that we might be able to find a different methodology to do those individual questions in a different way.
So when we did the BMG, Chris Shaheen hosted like some quote unquote office hours specifically. And he was here in the conference room. He had all the materials, kind of like you sign up for your tax appeal. Mm-hmm. And he had people kind of come sort of one-on-one or in small groups. And I would be willing to participate in that with him, kind of side by side. Maybe we could take turns. And so he's not doing it alone. And we're here representing our work. And that seems reasonable that we could pull off one or two of those between now and October 6th.
That feels like it might be more useful if that makes sense to Chris and you.
I also think this should be an ongoing.
Mm-hmm. Yes, not as a replacement for what your idea. They're sort of different. Okay. This is kind of like just to ferret out any last minute. I was very encouraged to hear Chuck say that he thought we were going in the right direction tonight. I do think we're kind of down to the last few gnarly issues. I don't really think we're going to get suddenly this new influx of public feedback that we haven't heard before now. I will do a Front Porch Forum post and encourage people to do the online survey. Maybe we do 2 of those between now and next week. Okay, so I would say for now, if you wouldn't mind holding both days open, the 1st and the 8th. And as soon as we know, we'll let you know. Okay. I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Chris seconds. All those in favor of adjourn, please say yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you
Yes.
very much, everybody. Wow, that was really a good illustration of how Chris Shaheen has totally taken over our world in such a good way. That was really hard to do without
Yeah.
him.
Oh, there were those specific things. Hey, Eric, my husband went to the Dragon Boat last week. He loved it.
Oh, bravo. He should come back.
Yeah.
I
think he
haven't
will.
been in there.
If he can, he will.
Great, great.
You know,
I'll,